Some legends are born in the heat of battle. Others emerge from the shadows where honor meets impossibility, where a single man becomes a ghost story whispered among enemies and allies alike. In the unforgiving waters of the South China Sea, where modern warfare meets ancient grudges, one Navy SEAL would earn a call sign that would make hardened admirals freeze mid-conversation and enemy commanders lose sleep. This is not a story about superhuman abilities or Hollywood heroics. This is about Marcus Iron Ghost Chun, a quiet kid from San Francisco's Chinatown who would become the most feared and respected underwater operative of his generation. A man whose very existence became classified, whose missions were so sensitive that even mentioning his call sign in the wrong room could end careers. When Admiral Harrison casually asked about call signs that day in the Pentagon briefing room, he expected the usual stories of training mishaps and inside jokes. He never expected the room to fall silent. He never expected to see the color drain from a four-star general's face. And he certainly never expected to learn about the man who could disappear beneath the waves like smoke, strike with the precision of a surgeon, and vanish before his enemies even knew death had visited them. This is the story of how Marcus Chun became the Iron Ghost, and why that name still sends chills through the intelligence community today. Marcus Chun learned to hold his breath in the murky waters of San Francisco Bay, not in some elite military training facility. Every morning before school, the skinny 12-year-old would slip away from his family's cramped apartment above their restaurant in Chinatown and make his way to the abandoned pier near Fisherman's Wharf. The water was cold enough to numb his bones and dirty enough that swimmers usually avoided it completely. Marcus loved it. His grandfather, Wei Chun, had taught him the old ways of breath control, meditation techniques passed down through generations of pearl divers from their village in southern China. The water does not fight you if you do not fight it, the old man would say in Mandarin, his weathered hands demonstrating the slow, precise movements that would help Marcus extend his time underwater. Become one with the current, and it will carry you where you need to go. Marcus's parents thought he was wasting time. They wanted him focused on his studies, on becoming a doctor or a lawyer, on achieving the American dream. They had sacrificed everything to give him. They did not understand why their son was drawn to the water, why he would spend hours practicing diving techniques he learned from library books, why he seemed more comfortable beneath the surface than above it. By the time Marcus turned 16, he could hold his breath for nearly 4 minutes. He could dive to depths that made experienced swimmers nervous. More importantly, he had developed an intuitive understanding of water dynamics, of how currents moved, and how to use them to his advantage. He moved through the water with a fluidity that seemed almost supernatural to observers. The first person to notice his unusual abilities was Commander Sarah Mitchell, a Navy recruiter who happened to be jogging along the waterfront one morning. She stopped dead in her tracks when she saw a teenager surface near the pier after what seemed like an impossibly long dive. When Marcus emerged from the water, completely calm and breathing normally, she knew she was looking at something special. "Son," she called out as Marcus wrapped himself in an old towel. "How long were you down there?" Marcus shrugged, still catching his breath, but showing no signs of distress. "For minutes, maybe 5. I wasn't really counting." Commander Mitchell had been recruiting for the Navy for 8 years. She had seen promising candidates from all walks of life, athletes who could push their bodies to extraordinary limits. But what she witnessed that morning was different. This was not just physical ability. It was a natural harmony with an environment that most humans found hostile. She spent the next hour talking with Marcus about his interest in serving his country. She learned about his family's history, about his grandfather's stories of the old country, about Marcus's own dreams of doing something meaningful with his life. By the time their conversation ended, both knew that Marcus Chun was destined for something far beyond the traditional path his parents had planned. The decision to enlist was not easy. Marcus's father, David Chun, had built their small restaurant from nothing, working 18-hour days to provide for his family. The idea of his eldest son choosing military service over college felt like a betrayal of everything they had worked toward. His mother, Lynn, wept for 3 days when Marcus announced his decision. "You could be anything," his father said in Mandarin, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Doctor, engineer, businessman. Why do you choose to be a soldier?" Marcus struggled to explain the calling he felt, the sense that his abilities were meant for something greater than personal success. "The water calls to me, Ba," he said, using the Mandarin word for father. "I can serve my country in ways that others cannot." His grandfather understood. Wei Chun had served in the Chinese resistance during World War II, conducting dangerous missions behind enemy lines. He recognized the look in his grandson's eyes, the quiet determination that could not be swayed by practical concerns or family expectations. "Some men are meant for safe harbors," Wei told Marcus on the night before he left for boot camp. "Others are meant for deep waters. You know which one you are." Basic training at the Navy Recruit Training Command in Great Lakes, Illinois, was almost insultingly easy for Marcus. While other recruits struggled with the physical demands, the discipline, and the mental pressure, Marcus thrived. His instructors quickly noticed that he approached every challenge with the same calm focus he brought to diving. During the swimming qualifications, Marcus set unofficial records that left even the instructors speechless. He completed the required tests so quickly and efficiently that they began creating additional challenges just to see what he was capable of. When they asked him to demonstrate his breath-holding ability, he disappeared beneath the surface of the pool for nearly 6 minutes, emerging only when the worried instructors began preparing for a rescue operation. "Where the hell did you learn to do that?" demanded Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, a 20-year veteran who had never seen anything like Marcus's aquatic abilities. "San Francisco Bay," Marcus replied simply. "My grandfather taught me to respect the water." Word of the exceptional recruit began to spread through the training command. Instructors who had been teaching swimming and water survival for decades found themselves learning from a 19-year-old kid from Chinatown. Marcus's approach to underwater movement was unlike anything in the standard training manuals. He seemed to understand intuitively how to use minimal energy for maximum effect, how to navigate in complete darkness using only the subtle movement of water around him. More importantly, Marcus demonstrated the kind of mental toughness that could not be taught. During pressure drills designed to simulate combat stress, he remained completely calm. When other recruits panicked or made mistakes under pressure, Marcus became more focused. It was as if stress and danger actually improved his performance rather than degrading it. Lieutenant Commander James Patterson, who oversaw advanced training evaluations, made a note in Marcus's file that would change the trajectory of his military career. "Recommend immediate evaluation for special operations training. Natural aquatic abilities unlike anything I have encountered in 25 years of service. Psychological profile indicates exceptional suitability for high-stress covert operations." The first hint that Marcus's destiny lay beyond conventional Navy service came during a routine training exercise in the Great Lakes. The scenario involved a simulated ship disaster, with recruits required to demonstrate their ability to survive in cold water while waiting for rescue. The exercise was designed to last 30 minutes, long enough to test endurance and water survival skills without creating actual danger. Marcus disappeared beneath the surface after the first 5 minutes and did not resurface until the exercise officially ended. For 25 minutes, instructors scanned the water with growing alarm, unable to locate him despite the bright orange life vest he was required to wear. Some began preparing for a recovery operation when Marcus suddenly appeared exactly where he was supposed to be, calm and alert as if he had been relaxing on a beach. "Chun!" Chief Rodriguez shouted. "Where the hell have you been?" Marcus treaded water effortlessly, showing no signs of fatigue or cold exposure despite the near-freezing temperature of the lake. "Exploring the underwater structure of the platform, Chief. There's some interesting current patterns down there." The debriefing that followed revealed that Marcus had spent the entire time underwater, using advanced breath-holding techniques and an intuitive understanding of the lake's thermal layers to remain comfortable and invisible. He had essentially turned a basic survival exercise into an advanced stealth demonstration. That evening, Lieutenant Commander Patterson made a phone call that would set Marcus on a path toward the most elite and secretive units in the U.S. military. The conversation was brief and conducted in the kind of careful language that indicated classified information was being discussed. "I have a candidate," Patterson said to the voice on the other end of the line. "Chinese-American, exceptional aquatic abilities, psychological profile that suggests he might be exactly what you're looking for." 3 weeks later, Marcus received orders that differed significantly from those of his fellow recruits. While they prepared for assignment to various Navy ships and bases around the world, Marcus was informed that he would be reporting to a special assessment program at an undisclosed location in Virginia. What kind of assessment? Marcus asked his company commander. The kind that doesn't appear in your official service record, came the reply. Pack light, and tell your family you'll be incommunicado for an undetermined period. The night before Marcus left for Virginia, he called his grandfather. Wei Chun listened without comment as his grandson described the mysterious new orders, the hints of special operations training, the sense that his life was about to change in ways he could not yet imagine. Remember what I taught you about the water, Wei said finally. It will test you in ways that have nothing to do with holding your breath or swimming fast. The deepest waters hide the greatest dangers, but they also hold the greatest treasures. Trust your instincts, trust your training, and remember that a true warrior serves something larger than himself. Marcus packed his few belongings that night, including a small jade medallion his grandfather had given him years earlier. It depicted a dragon emerging from water, a symbol of power and adaptability. He had no way of knowing that this medallion would one day become as legendary as the man who wore it, or that enemy soldiers would learn to fear its appearance more than any weapon. The flight to Virginia was unremarkable, a commercial airliner filled with business travelers and military personnel on routine transfers. Marcus sat quietly in his window seat, watching the landscape pass below and thinking about his grandfather's words. He felt no anxiety about what lay ahead, only a sense of anticipation, as if he were finally moving towards something he had been preparing for his entire life. The plane descended through clouds toward a destination that would transform Marcus Chun from a promising young sailor into something far more dangerous and valuable. Below him lay training facilities that would push him beyond every limit he thought he possessed, instructors who would teach him skills that existed nowhere in official military doctrine, and the beginning of a legend that would one day make admirals freeze at the mere mention of his call sign. As the wheels touched the runway, Marcus touched the jade medallion through his uniform shirt and smiled. The deep waters were calling, and he was ready to answer. The facility in Virginia looked nothing like Marcus expected. Instead of impressive military buildings with flags and ceremonial gates, he found himself at what appeared to be an abandoned industrial complex surrounded by dense forest. A single guard post marked the entrance, manned by personnel who checked his identification with the thoroughness of Secret Service agents before waving him through. "Welcome to nowhere, sailor," said the driver who picked him up at the gate. He was a weathered man in civilian clothes who introduced himself only as Brooks. The vehicle was an unmarked van with tinted windows that prevented Marcus from seeing much of the surrounding area as they drove deeper into the facility. "How many others are here?" Marcus asked, making conversation as they navigated what seemed like miles of winding roads through thick woods. "Fewer than started," Brooks replied cryptically, "and probably fewer than will finish." The van stopped at a cluster of low, nondescript buildings that could have housed anything from a research facility to a corporate retreat. Brooks led Marcus to what appeared to be a standard dormitory room, sparsely furnished with military-issue furniture, and a single window that looked out onto a courtyard where a dozen other young military personnel were engaged in what looked like advanced physical training. "Chow is at 1800 hours," Brooks informed him. "Formation at 0500 tomorrow. Don't be late for anything here, ever." Marcus spent his first evening observing his fellow candidates. They represented all branches of the military, men and women who had clearly been selected for exceptional abilities. He watched a woman who appeared to be Navy execute knife-fighting techniques that moved too fast to follow clearly. A Marine demonstrated unarmed combat skills that looked more like choreographed violence than traditional martial arts. An Air Force pilot discussed navigation techniques that seemed to involve flying missions that officially did not exist. The conversation stopped when Marcus approached their table in the dining facility. He introduced himself using only his last name and service branch, following the lead of the others who shared minimal personal information. The unspoken understanding seemed to be that they were all here for something that required more than ordinary security measures. "You're the swimmer," said a compact woman with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. She introduced herself, as Davis, Army Special Forces. Her tone carried neither judgment nor particular interest, merely an acknowledgement of information she had already received. Marcus nodded. Among other things, "We've heard about your Great Lakes performance," said a tall man who moved with the fluid grace of someone equally comfortable in air, on land, or underwater. "Thompson, Navy SEAL. Looking forward to seeing what you can do in more challenging conditions." The next morning began Marcus's introduction to training that existed in no official military manual. The instructors were a mix of active-duty special operations personnel and civilians whose backgrounds remained carefully unspecified. They taught techniques that blended conventional military skills with methods that seemed to draw from intelligence operations, maritime special operations, and disciplines that Marcus could not readily identify. The first phase of training focused on advanced underwater operations that went far beyond anything taught in standard Navy diving schools. Marcus found himself learning to use specialized breathing apparatus that allowed for extended underwater missions, navigation techniques that worked in complete darkness, and stealth methods that could render a swimmer essentially invisible even to sophisticated detection equipment. "Forget everything you think you know about diving," announced Instructor Walsh, a former Navy SEAL whose resume remained classified. "This isn't about swimming fast or holding your breath for a long time. This is about becoming an apex predator in an environment where most humans are helpless." The training began in control pool environments and gradually progressed to open water operations in Chesapeake Bay. Marcus discovered that his natural abilities, impressive as they were, represented only the foundation for skills that required years to master. The instructors taught him to use water temperature variations as camouflage, to navigate using subtle current changes that most divers could not even detect, and to move through water with such minimal disturbance that he left virtually no wake or bubble trail. More challenging than the physical techniques were the psychological aspects of the training. Marcus learned to remain calm and focused during underwater operations that would have terrified experienced divers. He practiced emergency procedures in scenarios designed to simulate the worst possible conditions, operations where equipment failure or enemy contact could mean death in environments where rescue was impossible. "The water can be your greatest ally or your deadliest enemy," Walsh explained during one particularly brutal training session that had left several other candidates struggling to maintain composure. "The difference is not skill or equipment. It's mindset. You have to trust the water completely, but never forget that it can kill you without warning." Marcus excelled in ways that surprised even his instructors. His childhood training in breath control and meditation gave him advantages that could not be taught to other candidates. While they learned techniques for managing stress and maintaining calm under pressure, Marcus had been practicing these skills since he was 12 years old. The result was a level of underwater performance that impressed veterans who had been conducting special operations for decades. The third week of training introduced combat applications that transformed swimming and diving from athletic disciplines into warfare capabilities. Marcus learned to approach enemy vessels undetected, to plant explosive devices on ship hulls while remaining invisible to sentries above, and to extract intelligence from underwater facilities that most military planners considered impregnable. The training scenarios became increasingly realistic and dangerous. Marcus found himself conducting practice missions that involved actual military installations, real security systems, and consequences for failure that went beyond academic grades. He began to understand that he was being prepared for operations that required absolute precision under conditions where mistakes meant death. "You're not training to be a better diver," Walsh explained after Marcus successfully completed a night infiltration exercise that had stumped other candidates for days. "You're training to be a ghost, someone who can go anywhere, do anything, and disappear without leaving evidence they were ever there." The transformation was gradual, but unmistakable. Marcus began to move differently, think differently, perceive his environment with a sharpness that had not existed before his arrival in Virginia. His instructors noticed the change and began pushing him toward increasingly challenging scenarios that tested not just his skills, but his judgment and creativity. During the 6th week of training, Marcus participated in his first full-scale exercise that simulated an actual combat mission. The scenario involved infiltrating a hostile facility via underwater approach, gathering intelligence without detection, and exfiltrating through enemy territory while avoiding capture or elimination by opposing forces played by other special operations personnel. Marcus disappeared into the dark waters of Chesapeake Bay, carrying minimal equipment, and emerged 12 hours later with intelligence that impressed the exercise evaluators and demonstrated capabilities that set him apart from even the most experienced candidates in the program. He had penetrated security systems that should have detected any intrusion, photographed documents that were considered impossible to access, and returned without any evidence that the facility had been compromised. "Ow!" demanded the exercise commander during the debriefing session. "We had underwater sensors, surface patrols, and continuous monitoring of all access points. According to our security systems, no one entered or left that facility." Marcus smiled quietly. "The water doesn't lie, sir. But it doesn't always tell the whole truth either." The explanation that followed revealed techniques that Marcus had developed by combining his natural instincts with the advanced training he had received. He had used thermal layers in the water to mask his heat signature, moved with timing that exploited the natural rhythm of security patrols, and accessed the facility through underwater passages that existed on no official blueprints, but that he had located through careful observation of water flow patterns. More importantly, Marcus had demonstrated an intuitive understanding of stealth operations that could not be taught through conventional training methods. He seemed to sense when he was being watched, when security measures were active, when conditions were optimal for movement. The combination of technical skills and operational instincts marked him as someone capable of missions that other personnel could not even attempt. The final phase of training introduced Marcus to weapons and equipment that existed nowhere in standard military inventories. He learned to use specialized underwater firearms that could function reliably in marine environments, explosive devices designed for covert placement on naval targets, and communication equipment that allowed coordination of complex operations without detection by enemy intelligence services. The weapons training was unlike anything Marcus had experienced in basic military education. The emphasis was not on overwhelming firepower, but on precision, stealth, and the ability to eliminate threats without alerting nearby enemies. He learned to kill quickly and quietly with weapons, with improvised tools, and with nothing but his hands and knowledge of human anatomy. "A ghost doesn't announce his presence," explained Instructor Kane, whose background appeared to include assignments that remained heavily classified. "When you strike, your target should be the only one who knows death is coming, and only for the brief moment before it arrives." Marcus proved exceptionally gifted at the psychological aspects of covert operations. He learned to read people, to detect deception, to project whatever persona would best serve his mission objectives. The shy kid from Chinatown discovered he could become anyone the situation required: confident businessman, worried tourist, aggressive criminal, or invisible service worker. The transformation was so complete that his instructors began to worry about the psychological effects of the training. Regular evaluations with military psychologists ensured that Marcus maintained his core identity and moral compass while developing the compartmentalization skills necessary for operations that require deception and violence. "Remember who you are beneath all the skills we're teaching you," advised Dr. Sarah Chun, the psychiatrist assigned to monitor his psychological development. "The techniques you're learning are tools, not identity. Use them to serve your country and protect innocent people, but never let them define who Marcus Chin becomes." By the end of his time in Virginia, Marcus had become something unprecedented in modern military operations. He combined the aquatic abilities of an elite Navy diver with the stealth skills of an intelligence operative and the combat effectiveness of a special operations soldier. His instructors struggled to classify his capabilities within existing military categories. The graduation ceremony was unlike anything from traditional military training. There were no families present, no speeches about honor and service, no official recognition of achievement. Marcus and the few other candidates who had completed the program received their assignments in private meetings that emphasized the classified nature of their future operations. "Your official records will show assignment to routine Navy positions," explained Captain Morrison, the senior officer who oversaw the program. Your actual duties will be coordinated through channels that do not exist in any organizational chart. From this point forward, Marcus Chun is a cover identity. Your operational identity will be determined by mission requirements. Marcus left Virginia with skills that made him one of the most dangerous individuals in the U.S. military and a psychological profile that remained remarkably stable despite months of training designed to transform him into a human weapon. He carried orders that directed him to report to a Navy SEAL team based in San Diego, where his real education in special operations warfare would begin. The flight to California gave Marcus time to reflect on how completely his life had changed since that morning when Commander Mitchell had seen him diving in San Francisco Bay. He was no longer the kid who had learned breath control from his grandfather or the recruit who had impressed instructors with natural swimming ability. He was becoming something that had never existed before, a fusion of ancient wisdom and modern warfare capabilities. As the plane descended toward San Diego, Marcus touched the jade medallion his grandfather had given him and wondered what Wei Chun would think of what his grandson had become. The old man had taught him to respect the water, but could he have imagined that those lessons would lead to training that turned swimming into a method of bringing death to his country's enemies? The medallion felt warm against his chest, a reminder of where he had come from and who he had been before the government decided to transform him into something unprecedented. Soon, he would meet the SEAL team that would complete his transformation from exceptional individual into legendary operator. Soon, he would earn the call sign that would make admirals freeze and enemy commanders lose sleep. Soon, Marcus Chun would become the Iron Ghost. Naval Amphibious Base Coronado stretched along the California coast like a fortress dedicated to creating the world's most elite warriors. Marcus Chun arrived on a bright Monday morning, carrying a service record that told only part of his story and orders that directed him to report to SEAL Team 7. The months in Virginia had transformed him physically and mentally, but nothing had prepared him for the culture shock of joining America's most legendary Special Operations Unit. "You must be our mystery fish," said Lieutenant Commander Jack Razor Morrison as Marcus reported for duty. Morrison was a compact man with the weathered appearance of someone who had spent years conducting operations in hostile environments around the world. His eyes held the alert intelligence that Marcus had learned to associate with operators who survived situations that killed other people. "Chun, sir." Reporting is ordered. Morrison studied Marcus with the careful attention of someone evaluating a potentially dangerous animal. "I've read your file. The official version, anyway. Navy diving school graduate, exceptional aquatic abilities, recommended for SEAL training by multiple instructors. What the file doesn't say is why half of it is classified, and why I received a personal phone call from a 2-star admiral telling me to put you through the most challenging training we could devise." Marcus remained at attention, uncertain how much information he was authorized to share about his time in Virginia. "I'm ready for whatever training you think is appropriate, sir." Morrison's smile was sharp and predatory. "We'll see about that. Report to Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez at 0600 tomorrow. He's going to introduce you to SEAL standards. I suspect you're going to find our version of challenging somewhat different from whatever you experienced in regular Navy training." Chief Rodriguez turned out to be a legend within the SEAL community, a 20-year veteran who had participated in operations on every continent except Antarctica. He was responsible for transforming promising candidates into operators capable of missions that existed only in the nightmares of America's enemies. His reputation for creating excellence through carefully applied brutality was known throughout the special operations community. "I don't know what kind of special training you received before you got here," Rodriguez told Marcus on his first morning of SEAL preparation. "But I can guarantee you that none of it prepared you for what we're going to put you through. SEAL training doesn't just test your physical and mental limits. It destroys them, then builds something better from whatever survives." The training began with basic SEAL skills that quickly escalated to scenarios that would have challenged veterans with years of operational experience. Marcus found himself learning advanced combat techniques, sophisticated weapon systems, and tactical procedures that integrated seamlessly with the specialized skills he had acquired in Virginia. More challenging than the individual skills were the team dynamics that defined SEAL operations. Marcus had to learn to function as part of a unit where each member's life depended on the competence and reliability of every other member. The individualistic mindset that had served him well in previous training had to be replaced with group consciousness that allowed for coordination under extreme stress. SEALs don't work alone, explained Petty Officer First Class Tony Deadshot Martinez during a particularly brutal training exercise that had tested the limits of Marcus's endurance. We succeed because we trust each other completely. Your underwater skills are impressive, but if you can't integrate with a team, you're useless to us. Marcus struggled initially with the adjustment from individual excellence to group coordination. His natural instincts had been developed through solitary practice and enhanced by training that emphasized independent operation. Learning to subordinate his individual capabilities to team objectives required a mental transformation that was as challenging as any physical skill he had mastered. The breakthrough came during a complex maritime insertion exercise that required the team to approach a simulated enemy facility via underwater approach, conduct reconnaissance without detection, and extract vital intelligence while avoiding capture by opposing forces. The scenario was designed to test every skill that SEALs might need in actual combat operations. Marcus's role was to lead the underwater approach and establish the initial infiltration route for the rest of the team. His specialized training had prepared him for exactly this type of mission, but the presence of team members who depended on his success added pressure that he had never experienced before. The exercise took place in the waters off San Clemente Island under conditions that simulated the worst possible operational environment. The water was cold, visibility was near zero, and the opposing forces included former SEALs who knew every trick that the infiltrating team might attempt to use. Marcus slipped into the dark Pacific waters carrying specialized equipment that would allow him to scout the target area and establish safe approach routes for his teammates. The familiar sensation of submersion brought immediate calm, despite the pressure of conducting his first mission as part of SEAL team. Moving through the underwater environment, Marcus employed techniques that combined his natural abilities with the advanced training he had received. He navigated using subtle water temperature variations, avoided detection by timing his movements to coincide with natural wave patterns, and gathered intelligence about enemy defenses through observation methods that existed in no standard military manual. After 2 hours of reconnaissance, Marcus had mapped the entire underwater approach to the target facility and identified security measures that would have prevented a conventional assault. He returned to his team with information that allowed them to modify their attack plan and exploit weaknesses that they could never have discovered through surface observation. "How the hell did you get that close without being detected?" demanded Chief Rodriguez during the post-exercise debriefing. "We had underwater sensors that should have picked you up from 500 meters away." Marcus's explanation revealed techniques that impressed even veteran SEALs who had conducted similar operations for decades. He had used the thermal layers in the ocean to mask his heat signature, approached from angles that exploited blind spots in the sensor coverage, and moved with such minimal disturbance that he had essentially become invisible to detection equipment. More importantly, Marcus had demonstrated the kind of tactical intelligence that transformed individual skills into operational advantages for his entire team. His reconnaissance had identified not just the security measures protecting the target, but the optimal timing for attack, the most effective infiltration routes, and contingency plans for extraction if the mission went wrong. That's the kind of intelligence that turns impossible missions into successful operations, Lieutenant Commander Morrison observed. "Chun, you just proven that your specialized training can enhance team effectiveness rather than replacing it." "That's exactly what we were hoping to see." The successful exercise marked Marcus's acceptance into SEAL Team 7 as a full member rather than a probationary candidate. His teammates began including him in the informal social activities that built the personal bonds necessary for effective combat operations. More importantly, they began trusting him with information about ongoing missions that reflected the team's actual operational responsibilities. Marcus learned that SEAL Team 7 specialized in maritime special operations that fell outside conventional military categories. They conducted missions that required capabilities possessed by no other military unit, operations so sensitive that their existence was denied by official spokesmen, even when evidence of their activities appeared in international news reports. We're the unit that gets called when regular SEALs can't handle the mission, explained Chief Rodriguez during an off-duty conversation at a San Diego bar frequented by special operations personnel. Deep water insertions, underwater facility attacks, operations that require capabilities that don't exist anywhere else in the military. The team's current assignment involved monitoring Chinese naval activities in the South China Sea, a region where increasing tensions between China and its neighbors had created conditions that could easily escalate into full-scale warfare. Chinese military forces had been expanding their presence in disputed waters, constructing artificial islands that served as bases for operations that threatened international shipping lanes. Marcus's first operational mission would involve reconnaissance of Chinese naval facilities that had been constructed on one of these artificial islands. The intelligence community needed detailed information about the island's defenses, communication systems, and the capabilities of naval vessels based there. Conventional surveillance methods had proven inadequate for gathering the required intelligence. This is exactly the kind of mission your specialized training was designed to support, Lieutenant Commander Morrison explained during the mission briefing. We need someone who can approach that facility undetected, gather specific intelligence about their operations, and extract without leaving evidence of American presence. The mission parameters were unlike anything Marcus had encountered during his training. The target facility was protected by sophisticated detection equipment, patrolled by alert guards who had been trained to expect American intelligence operations, and located in international waters where capture would create diplomatic incidents that could destabilize the entire region. Marcus would insert via submarine at a distance of 20 miles from the target island, approach using specialized underwater vehicles that could evade Chinese sonar systems, and conduct reconnaissance that would require him to remain undetected while operating within meters of enemy personnel. The intelligence we need is located in underwater installations that are accessible only through approaches that would be impossible for conventional divers, Morrison continued. You'll be operating alone for most of the mission, but extraction will depend on precise coordination with the submarine that deployed you. Preparation for the mission required weeks of intensive planning that involve analysis of Chinese defense systems, study of the target facility's construction and operation, and coordination with intelligence assets that monitored Chinese military communications. Marcus learned to operate equipment that existed nowhere in standard military inventories, memorize facility layouts that had been assembled from satellite imagery and human intelligence sources, and practice techniques for underwater photography that would provide the detailed documentation required by mission planners. The psychological preparation was as important as the technical training. Marcus would spend hours underwater in complete isolation, operating in an environment where capture meant death and mistakes could trigger international incidents. He learned meditation techniques that would help him maintain focus during extended periods of stress and develop contingency plans for scenarios where the mission went catastrophically wrong. Remember that you're not just representing SEAL Team 7 on this mission, Chief Rodriguez advised during one of their final training sessions. You're carrying the reputation of every special operations unit in the American military. The Chinese expect us to attempt this kind of operation, but they don't believe we have the capability to succeed. Prove them wrong. Marcus spent his last evening before deployment calling his grandfather in San Francisco. Wei Chen listened without comment as his grandson described the mission in carefully vague terms that revealed nothing about operational details while conveying the significance of what he was about to attempt. The deepest waters hold the greatest dangers, Wei said finally, repeating words he had spoken years earlier when Marcus had first begun diving in San Francisco Bay. But they also conceal the greatest treasures. Trust the lessons I taught you about respecting the water, but remember that some battles can only be won by those who are willing to risk everything. Marcus left San Diego aboard a nuclear submarine that carried equipment and personnel that officially did not exist. The voyage to the South China Sea would take 2 weeks, time that he would spend in final preparation for a mission that would either establish him as one of the most capable special operations personnel in the world or result in his disappearance in waters controlled by America's most dangerous potential enemy. As the submarine submerged into the Pacific depths, Marcus touched the jade medallion his grandfather had given him years earlier and wondered whether the old man had somehow known that his lessons about breath control and water meditation would one day be used in service of operations that could determine the balance of power in the world's most volatile region. The mission that lay ahead would test everything Marcus had learned about underwater operations, stealth techniques, and combat skills. More importantly, it would determine whether the shy kid from Chinatown had truly become the ghost warrior that his training had been designed to create. In the dark waters of the South China Sea, Marcus Chun would either prove himself worthy of the legend he was destined to become, or disappear forever beneath waves that had already claimed too many warriors who had underestimated the price of serving their country in the shadows where honor and duty converged with mortal danger. The USS Hampton cut through the dark waters of the South China Sea like a predator stalking its prey. 2 weeks of transit had brought the nuclear submarine to within operational range of the Chinese artificial island designated Objective Coral in classified mission documents. Marcus Chun spent the final hours before his insertion reviewing intelligence photographs and checking his specialized equipment for the 100th time. 30 minutes to insertion point, announced Lieutenant Commander Morrison over the submarine's internal communication system. The tension in his voice reflected the significance of the mission and the risks associated with conducting covert operations in waters that China considered its territorial domain. Marcus made his final preparations in the submarine's specialized deployment compartment, a cramped space filled with equipment that existed nowhere in standard Navy inventories. His breathing apparatus was designed for extended underwater operations in hostile environments. His diving suit incorporated stealth technologies that would render him nearly invisible to electronic detection systems, and his camera equipment could document intelligence targets under conditions that would defeat conventional photography systems. The mission parameters were brutally simple. Approach the Chinese facility undetected, gather specific intelligence about their naval operations and defensive capabilities, and extract without leaving evidence of American presence. Failure would mean capture by Chinese forces, international diplomatic crisis, and the compromise of intelligence capabilities that had taken years to develop. Remember that you're operating completely alone once you leave this submarine. Chief Rodriguez reminded Marcus during their final briefing. We can't provide support, we can't extract you if things go wrong, and we can't acknowledge your existence if you're captured. This mission succeeds or fails based entirely on your skills and judgment. Marcus nodded, understanding the isolation that defined his operational reality. This was the culmination of everything he had learned about underwater operations, stealth techniques, and individual survival under extreme conditions. The shy kid from Chinatown had become a weapon that the United States government was preparing to deploy against one of the world's most sophisticated military forces. The insertion process began at 300 hours under cover of darkness that provided minimal concealment from Chinese surveillance systems. Marcus exited the submarine through a specialized airlock that allowed him to deploy without creating detectable disturbances in the water column. Within minutes, he was swimming alone toward an objective that lay 20 miles away across some of the most dangerous waters in the world. The first phase of the mission required Marcus to navigate using only natural references and his intuitive understanding of ocean currents. Electronic navigation equipment would have provided precise positioning information, but it would also have created electromagnetic signatures that Chinese detection systems were designed to identify. Instead, Marcus relied on techniques his grandfather had taught him decades earlier, reading the water like an ancient mariner navigating by stars. The South China Sea revealed itself to Marcus as a complex environment where natural forces interacted with human activities in ways that created both opportunities and dangers for a swimmer operating alone. Chinese naval patrols followed predictable patterns that could be exploited by someone who understood their timing and coverage areas. Ocean currents created thermal layers that could provide concealment from detection equipment, but they also generated unpredictable eddies that could carry a swimmer into patrol zones where capture was inevitable. Marcus moved through the water with techniques that combined his natural abilities with years of specialized training. He controlled his breathing to minimize bubble trails, adjusted his swimming style to match the natural rhythm of wave action, and used depth changes to exploit thermal variations that would mask his heat signature from Chinese sensors. After 6 hours of swimming, Marcus reached the outer perimeter of the Chinese facility's defensive zone. Objective Coral was an artificial island that had been constructed by dredging sand and coral from the surrounding seafloor, creating a landmass that could support airstrips, port facilities, and defensive installations that extended Chinese military reach throughout the disputed region. The intelligence briefings had described the facility's surface features, but they had provided limited information about underwater defenses that could pose threats to an infiltrating swimmer. Marcus discovered that the Chinese had installed sophisticated sonar networks that created overlapping coverage zones around the island's perimeter. Navigation through this defensive maze required precise timing and routes that exploited blind spots in the sensor coverage. Using techniques he had perfected during training, Marcus identified safe approach corridors by observing how marine life moved through the area. Fish and other sea creatures instinctively avoided areas where sonar pulses were most intense, creating natural pathways that could be followed by someone who understood their behavior patterns. Chinese engineers had designed their defenses to stop human intruders, but they had not anticipated an infiltrator who could navigate like a native marine species. The approach to the facility's underwater installations required Marcus to descend to depths where water pressure became a significant factor in operational planning. His specialized equipment allowed him to operate at depths that would have been impossible for conventional divers, but the physical stress of deep water operations added fatigue that accumulated throughout the mission. Marcus reached the first intelligence target after 10 hours of continuous underwater movement. The Chinese had constructed underwater storage facilities that housed equipment and supplies for their naval operations, installations that were invisible to satellite surveillance, but critical to understanding the facility's operational capabilities. Accessing these areas required Marcus to navigate through underwater passages that had been designed to prevent exactly the kind of infiltration he was attempting. The photography equipment Marcus carried had been specifically designed for intelligence gathering under impossible conditions. Working in complete darkness at depths where conventional cameras would have failed, he documented storage areas that contained naval equipment, weapons systems, and communication gear that revealed the true scope of Chinese military activities in the region. Each photograph represented intelligence that could influence American strategic planning for years to come. The equipment Marcus observed indicated that the Chinese were preparing for operations that went far beyond the territorial disputes that dominated international news coverage. The weapons systems and communication gear suggested capabilities that could threaten American naval forces throughout the Western Pacific. Moving deeper into the facility's underwater infrastructure, Marcus discovered installations that had not appeared in any intelligence briefing. The Chinese had constructed submarine pens that could house attack submarines, maintenance facilities that could support extended naval operations, and communication centers that could coordinate military activities across the entire South China Sea region. The discovery of submarine facilities represented intelligence that would transform American understanding of Chinese naval capabilities. The installations Marcus photographed indicated that China was preparing for sustained naval operations that could challenge American dominance in the Western Pacific. This intelligence would influence military planning at the highest levels of the Pentagon and White House. As Marcus continued his reconnaissance, he became aware that Chinese security forces were conducting random patrols that could discover his presence if his timing was imperfect. The facility's defenders included underwater specialists who had been trained to detect and eliminate exactly the kind of infiltration that Marcus was conducting. Their patrols followed unpredictable patterns designed to trap infiltrators who relied on predictable security routines. Avoiding detection required Marcus to use every stealth technique he had learned, combined with improvisational skills that could not be taught in any training program. He used the facility's own infrastructure as concealment, hiding among support structures and equipment installations while Chinese security personnel passed within meters of his position. During one particularly close encounter, Marcus found himself trapped in an underwater passage while two Chinese divers conducted a security sweep that brought them directly toward his hiding place. Escape was impossible without detection, and capture would have meant mission failure and international crisis. Instead, Marcus employed techniques that transformed him into part of the underwater environment, remaining motionless among the facility support structures while armed guards searched for intruders they suspected were present. The Chinese security team spent 40 minutes searching the area where Marcus was concealed, using detection equipment that should have located any human presence. Marcus controlled his breathing, heart rate, and body temperature using meditation techniques his grandfather had taught him, becoming so still that he registered as part of the facility's infrastructure rather than as a living intruder. When the security team finally moved on, convinced that their sensors had detected a false positive, Marcus remained hidden for another hour to ensure that they would not return. The encounter had demonstrated that Chinese security measures were more sophisticated than intelligence briefings had indicated, but it had also proven that his specialized training could overcome defenses that would have stopped conventional infiltrators. The final phase of Marcus's reconnaissance required him to access communication facilities that would provide intelligence about Chinese operational planning and coordination with other military installations throughout the region. These installations were located in the most heavily defended areas of the facility, protected by multiple security layers that included both electronic detection systems and human guards. Approaching the communication facilities required Marcus to traverse underwater passages that were actively monitored by Chinese personnel. He waited for shift changes that created brief windows when guard coverage was reduced, then moved through detection zones with timing that exploited momentary gaps in surveillance coverage. The intelligence Marcus gathered from the communication facilities exceeded the mission's original objectives. He documented equipment that indicated Chinese capabilities for coordinating naval operations throughout the entire Western Pacific, communication systems that could direct submarine attacks against American naval forces, and planning documents that revealed Chinese intentions for expanding military control over international shipping lanes. Extracting this intelligence required Marcus to photograph documents and equipment under conditions where discovery would have meant immediate capture. He worked in complete darkness using specialized photography equipment that could document text and technical specifications without producing light that would alert Chinese security personnel. After 14 hours of continuous underwater operations, Marcus had gathered intelligence that would influence American strategic planning for decades to come. The documents and photographs he had obtained revealed Chinese military capabilities and intentions that had been completely unknown to American intelligence services. The extraction phase of the mission proved as challenging as the infiltration. Marcus had to retrace his approach route while carrying additional equipment and dealing with fatigue that had accumulated during hours of high-stress operations. Chinese security forces had increased their patrol frequency after detecting what they interpreted as anomalous sonar readings during his infiltration. Marcus employed evasion techniques that relied on his understanding of Chinese patrol patterns and his ability to navigate using natural ocean features. He moved through the facility's defensive perimeter during periods of reduced visibility caused by weather changes that scattered sonar pulses and degraded the effectiveness of electronic detection systems. The 20-mile swim back to the extraction point tested every aspect of Marcus's physical and mental preparation. He navigated using stars and ocean currents while maintaining radio silence that prevented any communication with the submarine that would extract him. The margin for error was zero. Arriving late at the extraction point would mean abandonment in hostile waters with no possibility of rescue. Marcus reached the extraction coordinates at the precise time specified in his mission orders, demonstrating navigation skills that impressed even veteran submarine crews. The intelligence he carried represented one of the most significant intelligence coups in recent American military history, information that would reshape strategic planning for potential conflicts in the Western Pacific. As the USS Hampton submerged with Marcus safely aboard, he reflected on the mission that had transformed him from a promising special operations candidate into a proven warrior capable of operations that existed at the very edge of what was possible. The shy kid from Chinatown had become something unprecedented in modern warfare, an individual whose capabilities could influence the balance of power between nations. The intelligence Marcus had gathered would be studied by analysts at the highest levels of American government, but the true significance of his mission lay in the demonstration that one person with exceptional skills and absolute dedication could accomplish objectives that entire military units could not achieve through conventional methods. Marcus Chun had proven himself worthy of the legend he was destined to become. Soon, he would earn the call sign that would make his name legendary among both allies and enemies. The Pentagon briefing room had hosted thousands of classified presentations over the decades, but few had commanded the attention that Marcus Chin's mission debrief generated among the intelligence community's most senior officials. Admiral Harrison, Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence, reviewed the photographs and documents that Marcus had extracted from the Chinese facility with the focused intensity of someone who understood their strategic implications. This intelligence confirms our worst suspicions about Chinese naval expansion, Admiral Harrison announced to the assembled officials. The submarine facilities alone represent a threat to American naval supremacy that we hadn't anticipated for at least another decade. Marcus stood at attention while senior officials discussed intelligence that he had risked his life to gather, listening to strategic assessments that would influence American military planning for years to come. The mission to Objective Coral had exceeded every expectation, providing documentation of Chinese military capabilities that had been completely unknown to American intelligence services. The operator who conducted this mission has demonstrated capabilities that are without precedent in modern special operations, continued Admiral Harrison. The level of infiltration achieved, the quality of intelligence gathered, and the complete absence of detection represent a new standard for covert operations in hostile environments. Lieutenant Commander Morrison had accompanied Marcus to the Pentagon for the debriefing, serving as both escort and advocate for his exceptional performance. During the flight from San Diego, Morrison had explained that successful completion of the Objective Coral mission would likely result in assignment to operations that existed at the very pinnacle of American special operations hierarchy. There are missions that even SEALs can't accomplish, Morrison had explained. Operations so sensitive and dangerous that they require capabilities possessed by only a few individuals in the entire military. Your performance in the South China Sea suggests that you might be ready for that level of responsibility. The debriefing session lasted for 6 hours, with intelligence analysts questioning Marcus about every detail of his infiltration and reconnaissance activities. His responses revealed not just technical competence, but operational instincts that impressed officials who had been conducting covert operations for decades. Marcus described defensive measures that had not appeared in any intelligence briefing, identified vulnerabilities that could be exploited in future operations, and provided tactical assessments that would influence American strategic planning. Your ability to adapt to unexpected conditions and exploit opportunities that weren't anticipated in the mission planning represents exactly the kind of operational flexibility we need for our most challenging assignments, observed Colonel Sarah Mitchell, the senior intelligence officer who had coordinated the mission planning for Objective Coral. The strategic impact of Marcus's intelligence became apparent during the days following his debriefing. Satellite surveillance assets were redirected to monitor Chinese naval activities that had been completely unknown before his mission. Naval intelligence analysts revised their assessments of Chinese military capabilities based on equipment and installations that Marcus had documented. Strategic planners began developing contingency plans for scenarios that had not existed in previous threat assessments. More importantly, for Marcus's future, his performance had attracted attention from officials who coordinated the military's most sensitive operations. 3 days after his Pentagon debriefing, Marcus received orders directing him to report to an office in Washington that existed in no official organizational chart and conducted business that was denied by government spokesmen. "Congratulations, Chun," Lieutenant Commander Morrison told him during their final meeting at Coronado. "You're about to join the most exclusive club in the American military. The operations they'll assign you make what we do in the SEALs look like training exercises." Marcus's new assignment involved reporting to officials whose names did not appear in any public documents, and whose responsibilities included coordinating operations that could influence the outcome of international crises. The briefing he received in Washington revealed that his success in the South China Sea had established him as a resource for missions that required capabilities possessed by no other individual in American intelligence services. "Your next assignment will test everything you've learned about underwater operations, but the stakes will be considerably higher than intelligence gathering," explained the senior official who conducted his briefing. "We have reason to believe that Chinese naval forces are preparing to conduct operations that could destabilize the entire Western Pacific region. Your mission will be to prevent those operations through methods that cannot be attributed to American government involvement. The mission parameters were unlike anything Marcus had encountered during his military career. Instead of gathering intelligence about enemy capabilities, he would be tasked with neutralizing threats through direct action that required him to operate as an individual weapon rather than as part of a military unit. The Chinese naval installation he had infiltrated during his previous mission had become the staging area for operations that could trigger a regional war. Chinese submarine forces based at Objective Coral are preparing to conduct attacks against civilian shipping that will be attributed to territorial disputes, but are actually designed to establish Chinese control over international shipping lanes, the briefing officer continued. Your mission is to disable those submarine capabilities before they can be deployed operationally. Marcus learned that he would be inserted into the South China Sea using methods that provided no possibility of extraction if the mission failed. He would approach the Chinese facility using techniques that pushed his underwater capabilities to their absolute limits, then conduct sabotage operations that required precision timing and complete stealth. Discovery would mean capture by Chinese forces who had been specifically trained to counter American special operations activities. This mission represents the kind of assignment that defines careers in our business, the briefing officer explained. Success will prevent a regional conflict that could escalate into global warfare. Failure will result in your death, and the implementation of Chinese strategies that could reshape the balance of power throughout the Pacific region. Preparation for the mission required Marcus to master techniques that existed nowhere in standard military training. He learned to use explosive devices that could be placed underwater with timing mechanisms that would create the appearance of accidental failures rather than sabotage activities. He practiced infiltration methods that would allow him to approach submarine facilities while avoiding detection by security systems that had been upgraded since his previous mission. The psychological preparation was as intensive as the technical training. Marcus would spend days underwater in complete isolation, conducting operations where capture meant torture and death at the hands of interrogators who understood the strategic value of the intelligence he possessed. He learned advanced resistance techniques that would help him maintain operational security even under extreme duress. Remember that you're not just representing American military capabilities, advised the senior psychologist who oversaw his mental preparation. You're carrying the responsibility for preventing a war that could cost millions of lives. The pressure of that responsibility will be as challenging as any physical danger you face during the mission itself. Marcus's final briefing revealed that intelligence services had detected Chinese preparations for submarine operations that would target civilian vessels throughout the South China Sea region. The attacks were designed to create international incidents that would justify Chinese military intervention in territorial disputes, establishing naval control over shipping lanes that carried 40% of global maritime trade. The submarines based at Objective Coral are equipped with weapons systems that could sink civilian vessels while creating the appearance that they were destroyed by mines or mechanical failures, the intelligence briefer explained. Your mission is to disable those submarines before they can be deployed for operations that would trigger international crises. Marcus would approach the facility using a specially designed submersible that could evade Chinese detection systems while carrying him to within operational range of the submarine pens he had photographed during his previous mission. Once inserted, he would have to navigate through defensive systems that had been reinforced specifically to prevent the kind of infiltration he had successfully conducted before. The sabotage operations would require Marcus to place explosive devices on Chinese submarines while they were moored in underground facilities that were protected by multiple security layers. The explosives were designed to create mechanical failures that would appear to be accidental malfunctions rather than sabotage activities, preventing Chinese officials from identifying American involvement in the destruction of their naval assets. The timing has to be perfect, explained the mission coordinator during the final planning session. The explosives must detonate while the submarines are in port before they can be deployed for operations against civilian targets. If the devices activate too early or too late, the mission fails, and Chinese naval capabilities remain intact. Marcus left Washington carrying equipment that represented the culmination of decades of research into underwater sabotage techniques. His submersible incorporated stealth technologies that made it virtually invisible to sonar detection, and his explosive devices used timing mechanisms that could be set with precision measured in minutes rather than hours. The deployment to the South China Sea took place from a location that existed on no official maps, using transportation methods that left no records in any government database. Marcus traveled alone, carrying identity documents that would not survive investigation and equipment that would be disavowed by American officials if discovered by enemy forces. The final insertion occurred during weather conditions that provided natural concealment for his approach, but also created dangerous operating conditions that tested his skills and equipment to their limits. Marcus piloted his submersible through storm-generated currents that could have crushed conventional underwater vehicles, navigating using techniques that relied on instinct and experience rather than electronic guidance systems. Reaching the Chinese facility required Marcus to evade patrol submarines that had been deployed specifically to prevent American infiltration attempts. Chinese naval forces had learned from his previous successful mission, implementing defensive measures that were designed to stop the exact kind of operation he was conducting. Marcus approached the submarine pens using routes that exploited blind spots in the enhanced security coverage, moving through underwater passages that had been modified since his previous infiltration, but that still contained vulnerabilities that could be exploited by someone who understood their construction and defensive capabilities. The sabotage operations required Marcus to work within meters of Chinese submarine crews, while placing explosive devices that had to be positioned with absolute precision to ensure effective destruction of their targets. He spent hours underwater in the most heavily defended facility in the South China Sea, conducting operations that would have been impossible for any other individual in American military service. When Marcus finally extracted from the facility, he left behind explosives that were timed to detonate over a period of several days, creating the appearance of multiple mechanical failures rather than coordinated sabotage activities. The Chinese would lose their entire submarine capability at Objective Coral, while remaining unaware that American forces had conducted operations against their installations. Marcus's extraction to the waiting submarine occurred just as the first explosions began to destroy Chinese naval assets that had threatened civilian shipping throughout the region. The mission had succeeded completely, preventing Chinese naval operations that could have triggered international conflicts while maintaining American deniability about involvement in the destruction. As news of the accidental explosions at the Chinese facility reached American intelligence services, Marcus received unofficial recognition for conducting one of the most successful sabotage operations in modern military history. The submarines he had destroyed represented capabilities that China could not replace for years, effectively neutralizing threats to international shipping that had dominated strategic planning throughout the Pacific region. 3 weeks after the mission, Marcus sat in a Pentagon office while Admiral Harrison reviewed his performance and discussed his future in American special operations. The conversation would determine whether Marcus continued conducting individual missions or joined the small group of operators who coordinated the military's most sensitive activities. Your operational record represents capabilities that are without precedent in modern warfare, Admiral Harrison began. The missions you've conducted have influenced strategic planning at the highest levels of government and prevented conflicts that could have destabilized entire regions of the world. The Admiral paused, studying Marcus with the careful attention of someone who understood the significance of the conversation they were conducting. The intelligence community has a need for operators who can conduct missions that exist beyond the capabilities of conventional special operations units. Your performance suggests that you might be ready for assignments that require you to operate as a strategic asset rather than as a tactical operator. Marcus listened carefully, understanding that he was being offered assignment to operations that would define his military career and potentially influence international relations for decades to come. The shy kid from Chinatown had become a weapon that the American government deployed against threats that could not be addressed through conventional military means. There is one final consideration, Admiral Harrison continued. Operators at your level require call signs that reflect their capabilities and the respect they've earned through exceptional service. Your missions have demonstrated qualities that deserve recognition within the special operations community. The Admiral opened a classified folder that contained Marcus's complete operational record, including assessment from officials who had coordinated his most sensitive missions. Your ability to disappear beneath the surface, strike with absolute precision, and vanish without leaving evidence has earned you a call sign that reflects those capabilities. Marcus waited, while Admiral Harrison prepared to announce the name that would define his legend within the special operations community. The call sign that would make other operators freeze when they heard it mentioned in classified briefings. Marcus Chun, Admiral Harrison said formally, "Your call sign is Iron Ghost. You have earned that designation through operations that represent the highest standard of individual excellence in American military service." As the words were spoken, Marcus understood that he had completed his transformation from the kid who learned breath control in San Francisco Bay to the operator whose very name had become synonymous with missions that existed at the very edge of what was possible in modern warfare. The Iron Ghost had been born in the depths of the South China Sea, forged through operations that tested every limit of human capability and dedication. From that moment forward, Marcus Chun would be known by a call sign that made admirals pause and enemy commanders lose sleep, a legend that would inspire and intimidate in equal measure throughout the special operations community. The shy kid from Chinatown had become something unprecedented in modern warfare, and his legend was just beginning.